Hello, this is Dr. Mike, and I'd just like to talk to you for a little while and perhaps share why I find working with CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy approaches to be so rewarding for me as a therapist, because people get it. And when they get it and they make the connection, they can move from a place of feeling stuck and troubled by thoughts and feelings and emotions and the way they respond to those thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I suppose we'd call that behavior, and move to a place where the exact same situation shows up and we just find ourselves perhaps even smiling and recognizing that we have choices about the way that we think. And I'd like to take you through this, just looking at the model that's on the slide. And you can see as you look at that model that's on the slide, that it starts with the situation. So I'm going to kick off by just describing a situation, and we're going to call the young woman that I was working with, we'll change her name, we'll call her Selma. And the situation was this, that whenever Selma spent a day with her baby, the baby would cry, and quite often it would be quite grumpy and it wouldn't smile a lot. And the moment her partner came in from work or came in from just being out, the baby's eyes would light up and a smile would come across its face, and the baby would put its arms out like that to be picked up immediately. And this is what was occurring in Selma's mind and in her body. And this was the way that she was responding or behaving. So her husband would come in and her baby would throw its arms open and smile with glee at seeing Dad. And the thought that Selma realized was coming into her head when we talked about this was the thought came in, which was, I'm just rubbish. I can't make my baby smile like that. Okay, so I'm just rubbish. I can't make my baby smile like that. And if we go that way, left, as I'm looking at it, you see mood and feelings. And the moment that thought, I can't make my baby smile like that, I'm rubbish, showed up, what happened was she felt a bit down. And at the same time, her physical response to this was a sort of, a flattening. And she would feel literally her heart sink. And at that moment, when that thought came in and her mood dropped, and perhaps even on that right side, an angry feeling showed up. And the way she responded physically was that sort of drain of energy feeling. And then she found herself just feeling so flat and empty that she wouldn't smile like the baby smiled to welcome her partner home. She would feel tired all of a sudden. And perhaps in that situation, another thought Selma described would show up. And that thought was, I'm so tired, I can't even bother to stay down and have some family time. And the physical reaction was one of fatigue and tiredness. And the mood was one of almost despair and the feeling of never getting anything right, and the feeling and the emotion of sadness. And Selma would then behave by not even saying hello to her partner, maybe even snapping at him and telling him how unfair everything felt and how useless he was. And as you can imagine, this collection, this pattern of thinking, of the physical side of this, the moods, the feelings that were being engendered, were being pushed into focus, and then the subsequent behavior that Selma was engaging in went the other way. See the arrows go the other way as well. And that would lead her to feel even more flat and despondent physically, and her mood to become even darker, and the thoughts to change from I'm rubbish to I'm still rubbish, and he's so unfair. And we can all understand this. But I think as we look at this diagram and we consider Selma's situation, we can begin to wonder, well, how might CBT help with this? So Selma does some CBT, some cognitive behavioral therapy, and she explores her thoughts. And she comes to realize that her thoughts are actually really poor indicators of reality. And they're the sort of thoughts that Selma gets when she is feeling depressed and down. And Selma begins to realize that her thoughts are very, very unhelpful. And they're characterized by always personalizing everything that happens. It must be about how rubbish I am if the baby smiles. So in time, the same situation shows up. And her partner comes back, and her baby, annoyingly, I'll grant, smiles, and its eyes light up, and it's just grins. And the thought that comes in is exactly the same. It's, oh, I'm rubbish, this is so unfair. And then she catches herself and she smiles. She thinks to herself, and she notices that actually I have a choice here, and there's no evidence at all that I'm rubbish. And it's very likely that this is not about me. This is actually just about how lucky I am to have a partner who really loves my baby, and how lucky I am that my baby really loves my partner. And the physical response then is different. She notices a little feeling of joy and contentment, and her mood brightens, and the feelings she gets are feelings of love and warmth, and the behavior changes too. And she smiles at her partner, and she says, do you know, it still really annoys me that I spend all day with our baby, and the best smile of the day is reserved for you. And I get it. And instead of that bringing me down now, it makes me feel great. So I've tried in this short film to just see if we can't illustrate how we can move from this to this by becoming curious about whether or not the way we think about stuff affects the way we feel physically, affects the way we feel emotionally, affects our mood, and to some extent, if we're not careful, dictates our behavior. And sometimes I like to think of life as being a bit like a bus journey. And as long as we're driving the bus of life, and we're taking our thoughts and our feelings in the direction of travel that we want to go in, and as long as the way we behave on our bus of life takes us towards the human being we want to be, then life is usually pretty okay. And so there really is something about learning cognitive behavioral therapy strategies. Now, finally, I'd just like to say that when you're doing this work, it really helps to have a skilled advisor or a therapist or somebody who also really understands CBT so that you can talk about your thoughts and your feelings and the way it affects you physically. And you can share different behaviors that might work better or not in certain situations. So if you can, sometimes it might be your health visitor, it might be a therapist, it might be a skilled helper like somebody from a children's centre, it might be a really good friend, it might even be that partner that gets welcomed with the huge smile. Or maybe it's one of your really good buddies. But this approach works. And you too can move from this situation to the same situation occurring again, but responding differently. And my hope is that in learning that stuff and in getting really good at it, you can help with your own anxiety. You can learn to improve your mood by being more in touch and more curious about those thoughts, not letting our thoughts and our feelings drive that bus of life, making sure that you're in the driver's seat. I hope that's helped.